In the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night, in the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night.
Hello everyone, I am Anthropomantic Fiend, and I do horror-related things on the internet. Before I get into today's review, I do have one quick announcement to make. What the hell, people? I went to mail out the prizes for my 400 subscriber contest a few days ago, and when I got up that morning, I was at 500 subscribers. What happened? Thank you to everyone who's helped me get this far. A special thank you to NSC Campos, who I did a collaboration with recently, and after I did that, he just was like, I'm going to get Anthro to 500, and posted a thing on his Instagram story saying that, and his followers swarmed my channel and pushed me to 500. I'm a little bit overwhelmed. I can't keep up with my own channel anymore, but thank you to everyone who has been supporting me. I really, really do appreciate that this many people care about the things that I do. Today, I'm reviewing 976 Evil 2, which sometimes has the subtitle The Astral Factor. This film came out in 1992, and if you recall, the original 976 Evil was directed by the one and only Robert Englund. So who did they get to direct the sequel? Jim Wynorski. Jim Wynorski is, of course, best known for movies like Chopping Mall, as well as doing films such as Sorceress, and Ghoulies 4, which I hear is the worst Ghoulies movie. I don't know if I'll ever review that one. And a bunch of softcore movies with really, really, really stupid titles that I have recounted before, but you really do just need to look up those titles yourself because they have to be seen to be believed. This film stars Patrick O'Brien, who is returning from the first 976 Evil. As I mentioned in my review of that film, he was also in Relentless and I Saw What You Did. Debbie James, who was in Bigfoot, The Unforgettable Encounter, Future Kick, and Mind Lies. Renee Assa, who has been in movies such as Deep Cover and shows such as the 1990 Flash series and Baywatch. And Leslie Ryan, who was in Night of the Creeps, The Assault, and Terror in Paradise. So this film follows the character of Spike following the traumatic events of the first 976 Evil. He kind of thinks all of that's behind him until he gets another call from the 976 number, which has apparently not given up on him as a customer. He is also seeing a girl named Robin who has been having these visions of different people dying in her little town, and she doesn't really know why, but after she has these visions, these people do end up dying, and she's trying to figure out what the hell's going on with that. And at the same time, a former teacher whose name I am, for whatever reason, forgetting, and it's bugging the hell out of me because they say it a million times in the film, it'll be down here somewhere, has been taken in and arrested under charges of committing some of these murders. But after he's been arrested, the murders continue. And we discover that he has found the 967 number somehow, and he's been using the powers that the 976 number has been giving him alongside astral projection to continue committing his murders. The score for this film was done by Chuck Serino, who did the score for Chopping Mall, also directed by Jim Wynorski, and Dire Wolf. I've reviewed both of those films. They're both really fun. He's also just been a longtime collaborator with Winorsky on a bunch of his other projects. His score for this film is one of the respects in which I think this film surpasses the original. It's actually hard to tell whether or not they're using synths or actual orchestral instruments, but there's a mixture of very 80s sounding synth noises and very traditional orchestral sounding pieces. The overall feeling of the score is really big and bombastic. I thought it was just a lot cooler sounding than the original score, which I really can't remember much of. Frankly, I can't remember much of this score either, but I think just the intensity of the score in this one heightens the emotionalness of certain scenes, and I was just actively thinking, wow, this is really cool music during a lot of the scenes. Visually speaking, this film does not have the kind of stylistic identity the first movie has, but the production values are kind of cheesy good. Everything has a very consistent cheesy but not too cheesy look to it. There are a lot more outdoor shots in this film. It has a much more naturalistic feel to it to some extent, just in terms of location. I don't know if I like or dislike that. I don't think it gives it as much of a personality and an identity as the first film, but it looked fine. There was one setting in this film, however, that I really, really liked, and that was an occult bookstore called Lucifer's, which is literally just for personal aesthetic preference reasons. It's very dark and spooky and stereotypically gothic, and there's literally like fog inside the store and just surrounding it, and we've got this relatively naturalistic setting for the rest of the film, and then there's just Lucifer's in the middle of nowhere with fog around it and inside the store, and it's just so over the top spooky, and I kind of want to live there. Story-wise, this movie picks up where the last film left off. I like that we're still following Spike rather than throwing that character out entirely. It does just keep a little bit of familiarity and consistency with the first film that I appreciated. I like that he's there kind of to inform the other characters about what the hell's going on because he's had experience with it, and that the 976 evil number is not done with him and comes back after him to kill him in some really fun ways, because those kill scenes where there's not actually any visible killer, there's just kind of seemingly incidental things happening with like household objects and people's surroundings trying to kill them. That was kind of barely in the first film, and it's barely in this movie, but there is one really prominent scene where that does happen. It was just a really fun sequence, so I'm glad they brought back that aspect because there wasn't much of it in the first film. In regards to the character of Robin, I was initially confused as to why she is having visions at all, because they don't really explain it at first, which might have been fine, but I was just kind of like, they're not really giving us any reason why she's linked to any of this, but they kind of imply why she's having the visions with just a few little shots. It doesn't completely like explain the science of it, but there's no science here. This is weird Satan magic. It also adds another element to the plot that is really, really creepy. I didn't think the kills in this film were super creative in concept for the most part, but the way they're staged is kind of wacky and fun, and there is one kill sequence in particular that was just a blast in terms of how far out and absurd it was. I'm not going to go into details because I don't want to spoil it, but that is the TV sequence. All I'm going to say is it recreates what I think is one of the scariest scenes in horror film history, in my opinion, and I will never look at It's a Wonderful Life the same way ever again. In regards to Spike's storyline, my one main dislike when it comes to him is that he never brings up hoax once we know that he's had this traumatic experience, but he never brings up during like these heightened emotional states where people are freaking out and are like, what's going on? And, you know, why should I believe you that this is happening? He never once brings up that this number that they're dealing with killed his cousin. He acknowledges everything else, but he never brings up hoax. I mean, I guess you could just infer that that was really traumatic for him and he's kind of buried it, but I am positive Jim Wynorski did not put that much thought into that. I think if they just brought it up subtly in little ways in the dialogue, I would have appreciated that little touch, because Hoax doesn't deserve to be ignored. He was ignored and picked on for most of his life, and then he became a demon, and then everyone paid attention to him, and then he died, and everyone ignored him again. And that's sad. I think the addition of astral projection as an aspect of the storyline is a little bit weird and unnecessary. Mr. Former School Teacher's ability to leave his body and walk through walls could have just been chalked up to the demonic powers provided to him by the 976 evil number, and I still would have bought it. But the addition of the astral projection element does pay off a little bit at the very end of the film in kind of a bittersweet way, and it gives us an excuse to visit Lucifer's The Occult Bookshop, because Spike needs to get a book on astral projection to figure out what the hell he's dealing with, and I am absolutely not complaining that Lucifer's is in the film. And speaking of which, there is a little bit of dialogue that takes place between Spike and the owner of Lucifer's that is super cheesy, but I find it really, really kind of charming and endearing in a weird way. She says to him, "You look like a young Freddy Krueger," to which he replies, "And you look like Elvira on steroids." And she replies, "You say the sweetest things." He definitely does not look like a young Freddy Krueger, so it's a weird compliment, and it's just a weird piece of dialogue there, but there was something just so cheesy and weird about it that I found extremely charming. And the school teacher character, who I think is named Mr. Grubeck, I just remembered that. I hope I'm right. I will correct myself down here if I'm wrong. At first, he kind of feels like a creepy, enigmatic old man character akin to someone like the Tall Man in Phantasm, but he is a lot creepier to me in some ways because he's very, very human, and he is not completely in control. We have a brief scene of him talking with the 976 evil voice on the phone and freaking out because he's not sure what to do and like crying a little bit. I liked that there was a little bit of a vulnerable side to him, and he was not totally in control. The number was still masterminding everything, just like with Hoax in the first film. But after that scene, he is just a total crazed slasher villain. I didn't find him as compelling as Hoax in the first film because he didn't have any of the pathos of Hoax in the first film mixed in with his nastiness. But he was very nasty and sinister and over the top. He had a lot of goofy one-liners that I thought were fun. And he has this obsession with Robin that is really, really uncomfortable and creepy and disturbing. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it did emotionally impact me because I was like, ew, no. The acting in general is cheesy but watchable. A lot of the performances feel a little bit phoned in. A lot of the actors don't sound like they mean what they're saying, but a lot of the dialogue feels kind of meh, so the meh acting may be due to the meh dialogue, but it's really hard to tell. I don't think Spike is as compelling as a character this time around. He's kind of lost the hardened badass feeling from the first film, but I also think that's in line with where he is in this film. He just feels kind of worn down and tired, which may also be due to the fact that he now has facial hair. That does feel in line with where he is in this movie, because he's been through a lot in the last film. I didn't think he was a super interesting character, but I felt for him to some extent. By contrast, I love Robin in this film. I think her kind of struggle with her visions, and the way that creates this rift between her and her father, because her father thinks she's crazy or suffering from some kind of trauma because of the death of some of her classmates. There wasn't a lot of nuance to that, but I felt for her, and I thought she emoted the best of any of the characters in the film. As much as I was either invested in a very fun way with some of the deaths in the film or feeling bad for some of the characters as they died, none of them have great screams. They all feel like very fake, unemotional screams. If you were in some of the situations that some of these characters were in, you would be screaming bloody murder, not doing what these characters are doing. But Robin absolutely screams her lungs out, and she breaks down and cries, and she just has these really intense emotional moments in this film that added a lot more pathos to her character. It was a little bit over the top, but it felt a lot more emotionally real than anything the other characters were doing. My favorite minor character in this thing is the owner of Lucifer's, who's barely in the film, but as Spike said, she looks like Elvira on steroids, which I think is pushing it a little bit, but she has this kind of black vampiric dress with like a Dracula collar on it and this very over-the-top spooky demeanor. She's just a total gothy, spooky person stereotype who barely does anything in the film, but I just love that kind of type when it shows up in films, and I thought she was really, really fun to watch. The visual effects in this movie are really simple things that have been used for a long time in film, things like double exposure, rotoscoping, and like hand-drawn light and magic-y stuff, but they all have been used for such a long time for a reason. You know what effect they're using. It's not a realistic thing, but it works decently for what they're doing. When Mr. Grubeck appears in a character's mirror without being in the room with him, he's just in the person's reflection. I thought that was a legitimately impressive effect. The fake blood in this movie is very fake looking. I'm fine with that. There's also a blood explosion at one point in this film, which I am also very okay with. And Grubeck's demon makeup in this looks less like he's turning into a demon and more like his face is just kind of deteriorating. One character even calls him Crater Face at one point in the movie. It looked fine, but we never saw the transformation the way we did with Hoax in the first film. So there was something left to be desired there, but it looked solid. Overall, this film is definitely not the first movie, but for what it is, I really, really enjoyed it. There are some really fun sequences. I thought the plot was still really engaging, and I thought Robin was an amazing heroine, and a lot of low-budget 80s horror screenwriters and actresses could have taken a lot more cues from what Debbie James and the screenwriter did with that character in this film, because I thought it was really good. I don't think this is as necessary a watch as the first film is. I don't think either are necessary watches, but if you like cheesy 80s horror, I definitely recommend the first one. If you enjoyed what the first film was, and if you enjoy the works of Jim Wynorski and just fun, cheesy, low-budget 80s horror, I still do recommend this one. That is my review of 976 Evil 2. Thank you for watching my video, and hopefully I will see you in another one. Bye!